20 years I've been making products. Here, a year's worth of tar. That gooey tar that's hiding in here is the amount of 10 cigarettes a day over 1 year. Now, the average smoker actually smokes close to 20. So you can imagine what the smoker's cough is that they have in the morning. That is a month's worth of smoker's cough when they hack it back up, which is full of 4,000 plus different chemicals that then they eat. Of the tens of thousands that we've sold of these, we look at, say, a class of 30. If, of that 30, this makes them really think about changing whether they started smoking or kept smoking, you'll have saved, for every 2 in that class that stop, a life. Just these resources by themselves will have saved over 300,000 lives in the 20 years I've been doing this.
Okay, Paul, a warm welcome to the podcast. Could you just maybe begin with a sort of brief introduction to yourself and why you're back in the Lessons for Life campaign?
Yeah, of course, and thank you very much for being invited. So I'm a public health director, a fellow of the Faculty of Public Health, and what that kind of means is that I look after the kind of health, in a sense, of all adults, young people, but in particular children is my kind of a key aim. And in myself, I've come from a background which was a sporting background that then went into teaching, and I was a primary school teacher and a teacher at tertiary kind of colleges, etc. And through that, I came into the NHS and really felt a passion for making a change around health. And it's kind of gone on from there, and I've kind of got a number of different roles now, which are in PSHE, health education, life skills in general, also working with lots of different organisations, right from the ground in the schools up to MPs and members and ministers in Parliament. So, it's been great to be able to look at the Lessons for Life and just see how this could really contribute to the conversations that are going on really around life skills for children.
Fantastic. I'm curious, of course, to understand more about how Lessons for Life supports of those other campaigns, but I'm struck that you were a primary school teacher, which many of the people listening to this will be. So maybe just some reflections really on your time as a primary school teacher, or a few years ago perhaps?
Quite a few years. To be honest, it was very short because I realised probably I was only 21. So it was really, I did my PGCE up in Lancaster, a place called St. Martin's College, which I'm sure many will know that live in the Northwest. And I was able to do certain teaching practices and some of them were even kind of instrumental for me understanding that children need a different kind of help sometimes. And we have such a breadth of children that have different needs across the country, but even in the classroom. And so I was a year 5 teacher for a year. I've really enjoyed it. A small little primary school in a place called Fleetwood. So that's right at the end above Blackpool. And there was real needs there as well. So it was a great learning experience for me. But I think at that time I was just a little bit too young for it. And I thought, well, I want to try something that's a bit larger. And I actually found myself coming into something called the Healthy School Scheme, which was taking that primary kind of education, but taking it to a stage which was really just about health education.
Okay, so Paul, just maybe give us a flavour as to how Lessons for Life complements some of the other activities that you've been involved in. Maybe give us a flavour of those.
Yeah, so after the kind of teaching, etc., and I went in, as I say, to this kind of healthy schools, and from there building on my own resources and actually working with American and international companies to make resources that were used in the kind of PSHE and your life skills. So it was from there, around about 2017, that I started at an all-party parliamentary group, and that's at Westminster in the House of Commons, etc. And you'd often be able to there work with key professionals at the top of their game, with the ministers, to kind of really look at what we could do as a nation to change. And from that, it felt like we could go even further. So with ex-Lord Speaker, Baroness Frances de Souza, and a number of archbishops and all sorts of different key people, we had a little meal in the actual House of Commons, which was very nice, not something you do every day. And we set up something called the Children's Alliance. At first, it was called the Children's First, but it was essentially an organisation that was really going to look at the key problems of today, take all those professionals, those organisations, and we give more of a combined voice. And we've been doing that for quite a while. And I can tell you, if you wish, about one of the biggest kind of starts we had. So one of the things, again, as a teacher, is that you look at a school and you say, is it the PSHE curriculum, or is life skills wider? And then actually, is it even wider to the community and what difference we can make? And one of the areas there we did was something called Shores. We said we're going to do something that would look at the whole school. It would look at health, it would look at food, and it would look at advice. And we were just about getting that going in 2019, looking at gold standard. We've got some schools in the northwest, some schools in Tower Hamlets in London, Bristol, and we were really going to bring this together and put some paper together and say, this is the best evidence for working for schools. And COVID hit. Now, as a public health director, I immediately knew, prior to everybody else, that really there were going to be these lockdowns. And also it would be bad enough that schools would get pushed down. And from there was a quick kind of view that things like free school meals were going to be, well, where do these children get a decent meal? So luckily, at the same time as we were doing this, and I was bringing it and broaching it to the kind of, lead people, Marcus Rashford stepped up. And Marcus Rashford was doing brilliant, bringing this to the prominence. But at the same time, in the background, he was like, well, I'm not the expert. So we actually had a group of experts around Marcus Rashford to help him to deliver the right kind of messages that would hopefully help to make a big difference. And to get a long story shorter, with the Baroness, we did interviews on Radio 2, Jeremy Vine, all those kind of things. And we actually got the government of the day to change their mind, both to make sure there was food for those children that were at home in COVID, but also actually to set up something that schools will probably know about called the Holiday Activity and Food Scheme, which takes place outside in the school holidays, but gives children that need it food, exercise, somewhere that they can be creative, and even that kind of advice. And that was worth 400 million a year. And so we'd already, in this quick time, been able to do that at the Children's Alliance, even when everybody was locked down.
You speak to the government of yesterday. At that particular time, we now have a new government, and they are beginning to move forward with their opportunity mission. Where do you see the work that you started back then? How do you see that going forward under this new government? And have you got any kind of fresh research, fresh insight that you can share with them?
Absolutely. What we did is we're lucky enough to be able to speak with certain people prior to even when they were developing the manifesto. So around this time last year through into the start of 2024. And we met with Luciana Berger, who used to be a prominent MP, but had stepped down for a while and been asked by Sir Keir Starmer and other organisations within the Labour Party to look at what they could do about preventing some of the dangerous elements of life that were occurring for children and adults. And so we were lucky enough that I was able to bring together some of the public health departments. I was lucky enough to be able to speak with a number of the baronesses, lords, etc. And we had a meeting in the House of Lords where I was able to present gold, silver and bronze recommendations for on areas from physical activity, emotional health, the early years, and preconception, and physical activity, and even around social media, etc. And all of those papers had been condensed into 3 or 4 key things for gold. These are the biggest things. Silver, a bit cheaper. Bronze, you could do them quick. And they were brought by the 250 different organisations of the alliance that we brought together. Now, that was great because when the manifesto came out for Labour, we were able to see 1 or 2 of them instantly there. Free breakfasts for all children. That for looking at for pregnant women, folic acid is going to be added to certain kind of flour that will mean that 200 children each year don't have spina bifida, neural tube defects. So there were lots of things that were instantly in there. I think as we've gone on with the Labour Party, they've had a, should we say, a bumpy start. There is a lot, and I think we even kind of had a quick talk earlier that there could be more integrated rather than just saying what they're going to do. We want to see those actions. And I can tell you a little bit about more of some of the actions we now expect of the government.
Yeah, please do.
And one of the major ones is that they keep saying there's no money. So there's a black hole. The moment we have that situation, we could in a way for PSHE, life skills, the teachers themselves to have time, be educated and trained properly. Without some forms of ring-fence funding, that can't really happen. If we really want to make a change to the youngest in our kind of society, which we did years ago with things like Sure Style, we want to be able to do that, but it costs money. If we really want to give a good, healthy food, well, we should have universal free school meals. And therefore, we know children are not getting sided out, going, oh, well, look, they're on free school meals, etc. And the evidence is massive that this helps across the board. But this costs money, lots of money. And the government will say they haven't got it. But yet, if we don't put the pound in, we don't get the £10 savings for lowering diabetes, not having as many NHS complications. We've got a more productive society. So the key thing we put together as an alliance, and we're now supported by 60 MPs, we've got a petition of over 25,000 in the public signatures, lots of sign-up organisations, is something that's actually fairly simple. At the moment, we've got something called the Sugar Drinks Industry Levy. Basically, if you bought a drink in the last 6 to 7 years and it had sugar in it, then that would actually pay a tiny amount of tax. We're saying, let's move that to a high-fat salt and sugar tax. Basically, a tax on junk food. Once that tax is there, it's only small, but it's a lot when you look at the amount that is spent. That will raise around £2 to £3 billion a year. And then there's a massive feeling, and we're getting to see this in places like Australia, where they're banning social media for under 16. There's real mental health crisis going on. And that is linked to the amount of 8 hours that is the average that 15-year-olds are on some form of social media, etc. And so what we're saying is there should be a big tech tax. And you think, wow, that's going to be hard. Well, no, actually, it's already there. There's something that's kind of hidden over the last few years called the digital services tax. And that's a 2% tax on those big companies. And we're saying move that to 6%. If you do that, you'll have about £4 billion annually. And we're saying ring fence it. And what we mean by that is don't let it to go into a massive pot. Use these for key initiatives around schools. And that can be from making sure that we've got enough school nurses. It could be that we're making sure that we've got play policy so that things are not just didactically sent. We're not always just going straight to knowledge, because our society is changing with AI. We're not going to need the knowledge part. We're going to need the understanding and the creative side. So we're in a situation now where we've got real opportunity for funds. And the Lessons for Life is actually a major component there. Because what we're saying is the PSHE curriculum and all the RSE is going to change slightly, but really it's life skills across the whole school and even community. And so we're looking at this broad aspect and saying to government, we'll find you the money, you just need to put those levies on, and you've got the money to make real change, would you?
So a much more holistic discussion, perhaps, than what's happening at the moment, particularly with regards PSHE and British values and all of those other things. Where are you at within those asks with government? Are they listening at the moment? What's got to kind of move on with it to get it to the point where actually this becomes maybe a realistic proposition?
Yeah, I mean, the first great thing is we've had 3 ministerial replies. Now, those replies are still saying, well, actually, we're looking at these things in the manifestos, we've got these plans, and then that's fine, because we understand that when I work in kind of this policy side, that what they're saying is, we've seen what's happening. We're getting a little bit worried that there really is a big push from the public on this and the professionals. It needs to change. Actually, rightly, they're saying there does need change. They're saying such things as, they're going to have the healthiest children of a generation. So what we're able to do now is really push that. So we'll hope to take that into Parliament, take it to 10 Downing Street. We'll look to get on media, and we've often done that around things like school nurses. We recently did that in October, and we're on all ITV regions because we found that the evidence for school nurses is there should be 1 school nurse to every almost school or set of primaries. In actual fact, you look around the regions, it can be as high as 1 school nurse to 10,000 pupils. We can never be proactive about life skills if we don't tackle these areas. And I think politicians are open to this because I've never had 60 kind of parliamentarians sign up for something like this across the political spectrum as well. So yeah, they're listening. I think it's sometimes more can be a little bit like, oh, we're going to have to do something about this, but how do we do it?
Well, it sounds like you've got some practical suggestions there for sure. In terms of Lessons for Life, I mean, obviously there are lots of campaigns out there. What was it that really sort of struck you and connected you with this campaign and the messaging and some of the asks and recommendations at this stage?
I think it's because this is a prime time for change. We are in a new government. We're in a situation where AI is becoming so dominant, not only for the youngest in society, but through the kind of looking at university, the way that they're training to become teachers, but just people that will work in our, productive workforce. Given those massive changes are going to occur, and we just don't quite understand why, we need to make sure that the young people of today growing up will have the very needed life skills to be able to come into this changing world. We already had, when we were younger, a kind of set, it wasn't a plan of being in a job for 40 years, but it certainly still felt you went through certain rungs on the ladders. Some of you got to go to university, some didn't, some became into the technical skills and worked electricians, etc. All brilliant. But now it's all going to change slightly, because somebody who wants to go into architecture, it's going to be radically different how they do that. The way the curriculum and professionals are saying at the moment, of course, is that, we've had this Victorian model of knowledge. Hopefully you get some understanding. Hopefully you understand the concepts. You get creative. It's going to have to change slightly. And with that, life skills is a really personal kind of sense. If you understand your own body better, you understand your own mental health better, you develop a resilience, it means that you can go into a different, you can speak like this, rather than being in a situation when I was 15 where I probably would have mumbled and not being able to. I certainly don't think the child that I was would be able to do this now, but we want them to be able to not take 30 years to do that. We want them to be able to feel that they can come out, go into the kind of work that they do and be open, speak, and actually feel like they can make some mistakes so that they learn from it. Whereas I don't think that's truly what's happening in the moment, and teachers really want to be able to get those pupils to have that kind of spark, and they know it's there. They don't want to dampen it down. They want to brighten it up.
As you say, currently a knowledge-based curriculum, a very cramped curriculum. Certainly some people on the podcast that we've spoken to have talked about the need to make room in the curriculum if that's possible. But do you have a view as to how, so you get the funding right, great, but how does that manifest itself on a day-to-day in school? How should schools be approaching this if you have a view on that at this stage?
Yeah, I think there's a difference in the sense that if you look at, say, chemistry, you're going to need to know certain areas for your chemistry to be able to answer questions, and therefore you work your way down, you go into your A levels or etc. When you work with English, it's broader, so you need to read, but you need to be able to speak, you need to be eloquent, and it becomes broader as a life issue. Same as maths, you need it on your daily kind of how we work. That's the same with life skills, PSHE, personal development. Every time we interact in any way meaningfully, even with ourselves internally, it's to do with our way that we've learned how to live the life skills that you need. And I think that's where it shouldn't just be, well, here's a lesson, here's what you learn, and we're ticking it off like the chemistry one. It isn't like that. It has to be much broader. And therefore, it has to actually be throughout the school. And in that sense, you can think of every dinner time being a perfect example of learning about nutrition. And the fact is that the teachers of life skills are not just a single teacher or teachers. It's massively cross-curricular. It's for those playground assistants that are there that see maybe a bullying incident and are able to have the training and understanding to go, we can use this and play. We can make sure that those children are actually loving each other in the right way. There isn't the bullying, okay. And it works so that you find that the whole school community becomes an area for teaching life skills. And that, I really think, is what the Lessons for Life is bringing here. It's saying, let's broaden this out. Let's not just have these compartmental well, let's do citizenship. Oh, now I'm going to do British values. Now we're going, no. They come together and all those things have got to be done, but under a wider scheme of work in a sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of boxes to tick in school. I suppose for me, as I sit here, and I look back over the course of the year, you think about knife crime, how much tension is this getting now? Obesity's always been there. I watched a program last night around an experiment, 21 days.
Yeah.
Take get rid of the phones. Let's see what happens. I think we probably know what the outcome will be, and it'll be a positive one. But I think I was struck by one of the stories in that program around the suicide and how 13-year-olds are exposed to suicide, to porn. Not because they're going looking for it, but because these platforms are almost forcing the in themselves to the children. So I suppose within that context, the case for life skills becomes even bigger. The day-to-day rounded individuals that we want the children to be, but also, God, the issues that they're faced with are huge, different to when you and I were.
Absolutely. They're often world issues. And I think that brings up, it was an excellent program I saw as well. And one of the areas there is that I was lucky enough again to go to the House of Lords for a Lord Speaker event. And in that case, the US Surgeon General had come over. Now, actually, he was born in Huddersfield, but he was general in the army, and they essentially, the US Surgeon General, they used to have the warnings on the cigarette packs as we are, but they started them back in the kind of 60s. And the US Surgeon General is like the head of public health for America. And one of the key missions he had was about the dangers that social media online were having in the USA. So we had all these Cambridge academics, etc., and I'd been able to bring along a certain number of key public health people. And immediately, when we're talking and you discuss these things, you realise that you can't just make a difference in a school, in a region, even in the country. It's worldwide, because these organisations, you've got your TikToks, you've got your Snapchats, you've got your Facebooks, your Metas, all these different things, they're worldwide. So to have an impact can be very difficult. So even in there, I was lucky to actually discuss with the US Surgeon General, but again with leaders in public health. And there's ideas that we've had, such as a vaccination of social media. Sounds weird. But essentially, at the moment, the algorithms are getting so powerful that if somebody is looking at suicidal ideation, what would happen is that would say to the algorithm, right, we need to put in something positive. So what happens is something would come in and say, do you know the Samaritans? Do you know that there's the child line? They'd come in with a video that would be around about, mental health and emotional well-being. And the moment you think, actually, thinking about it, back in the time when we were younger, we remember the adverts that were telling us about Charlie plays with, don't go with strangers. There were all these positive messages that we got. Children, young people, even adults, do not have that on social media. What they can get is stuck in a rabbit tunnel of suicidal ideation, or it can be around anorexia, and no good public health messages are getting through there. And when we look at, if they're talking 8 hours, some children are on this, then if we do something like vaccination social media, what we're saying is, right, they've got to have a social responsibility, a bit like a polluter pays. And they've got to give monies to people like the public health, so the organisations that can make these kind of videos, and we would have them out there. So that what happens is those algorithms stop giving just the worst things in society, because that's what's tending to happen. And we'd be able to hopefully help to save lives, but also direct those lives out as well.
I suppose the slightly frustrated thing from me as the sort of the questioner here, if you like, is there's a lot to do, isn't there? And it's where obviously we've got a starting point, but I suppose it's, well, what sort of time frame might we be looking at for some of this? Is it a case of kind of some gentle, small steps, some sort of quick wins for both Lessons for Life and the wider initiatives that you're involved in? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we can put the best evidence forward. You can do all the work, you can campaign, but if the political side and the political will feels it's too dangerous to do, or that they feel it can be an element that they just can't afford at the moment, etc., you can't get forward from there. That is it. But what you can do is have enough professional pressure in a way that's also not demanding, but using that evidence base to say, look, and hopefully the public get behind that. Then those ministers, those people in power say, we've got to do something about this. And once you get that, you do get the small wins. But sometimes you get like with the Marcus Rashford part, where you get the big wins, where you suddenly get 400 million to make a massive difference. And it completely goes out your hands then. But that's okay, because you don't, all you need to know is the difference is being made, and you can go from there. And I think that's what we can do. Sometimes you will bang your head against a brick wall and nothing will hurt except for your head. Other times, weirdly, that brick wall will fall down and it'll be like, oh, that's going to put millions into this and make a real difference.
Are there other kind of examples that you're particularly proud of in terms of the difference that you made to individuals, to groups, whether it's in this country or beyond?
I'm lucky enough that a kind of day job that I have along with everything else is creating, almost like Willy Wonka, but health education resources. And I actually do that as part of a company called Health Edco in Charters Graphics. And they're based in Texas, and I get to go over there, etc. And it's great because literally for 20 years I've been making products, and I have got one or two, so I'll show you. And we've got here a year's worth of tar.
Oh, wow.
So that gooey tar that's hiding in here is the amount of 10 cigarettes a day over 1 year that would go in the person's lungs. Now, the average smoker actually smokes close to 20. So you can imagine what the smoker's cough is that they have in the morning. And actually, that is a month's worth of smoker's cough when they hack it back up, which is full of 4,000 plus different chemicals that then they eat. And these are the kind of resources, and certainly these two, that, you know, we've been saying for many years, and I've been able to get these across the UK, Europe, Americas, you know, even out to Mongolia and all what. And of the tens of thousands that we've sold of these, we look at, say, a class of 30. If of that 30, this makes them really think about changing whether they started smoking or kept smoking, then what happens is, because the damage is so bad from smoking that kills 1 in 2, that you'll have saved, for every 2 in that class that stop, a life. And when you work it out that way, and I've kind of done the mental maths, just these resources by themselves will have saved over 300,000 lives in the 20 years I've been doing this. And I don't know if many people can say that, and I just think, gosh, this is why these are so needed. Because it isn't also just what happens in the school, it's their life as they go on. And then, in my case, I was unlucky enough that my mum and my uncle died at 47 and 49. I'm now older than them because they had cancer from smoking. It affects families throughout. So, yeah, I hope that I've had an effect around the world, and I hope to continue to do little things. I find it hard to say sometimes because, to say that you could have saved 300,000 lives sounds, wow, that almost feels like boasting. But if we do the right kinds of things in a kind way and get good messages out there, I think that's truly what life skills is. It enables people to then live their life just not knowing the dangers that they could have had.
Yeah. I mean, just a fantastic example of the power of education, the power of, well, relatively simple resources.
Absolutely.
But no, fantastic to hear about that. I suppose returning to the money question, you know, as we sit here in this country right now, you know, the Chancellor being very clear on money, and again, waking up to the news today that 10,000 civil servants are going to lose their jobs because of cuts. We're going to see more of this in the public sector. So I suppose with that in mind, is kind of funding the number one priority we should be looking at in terms of being able to affect a change with this campaign, Lessons for Life, and your related campaigns, even though it kind of moves it away from the real need here, which is to educate the children. We talk about money rather than the children.
Yeah. I think, without a doubt. I mean, often you'll find pieces of evidence that will say categorically that something like free school meals, if it was universal, would make a massive difference on the nutrition, health, well-being into the future. It'll help families, etc. But it comes down to money. And it also comes down to politics. You know, there's a lot of people in society, and we don't always see in a longer term, we see in a short term. Now, in that case, we've really discussed in our groups. As I say, there's 250 plus organisations and key professionals that we speak with, MPs, baronesses, lords, etc. And we've realised that part, as I was kind of intimating, talking earlier, that there are specific levies that we could put on junk food, which not only will raise money, but will actually lower obesity rates of all and adults and the children. We can look at that tax on social media, big tech, that will make a difference, hopefully, in them thinking about the way that they actually just put anything out there and say, oh, we're looking at some of this and we're trying to make sure some 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds don't see this. We know it's not good enough. If you look at cigarettes, if you look at alcohol, there's always been those taxes, those different areas, levies on them, because that makes a difference to those companies. It makes a difference to the public and how it's used. We got this nice big petition going of 25,000 plus signatures on change.org to tax big tech and junk food. We then see that those funds, which is about $4 billion a year, ring-fence them. Same as the government's just done around gambling. They've just put a levy on that, and they've just put 100 million that's ring-fenced around the damages from gambling. We're saying, do the same. Tax those big junk food companies, big tech. Use the money, school nurses, play policy so there's a creative Britain rather than just a straightforward. Make sure those early years are really playful. Look at the different areas in terms of, PSHE, well-resourced, so that the teachers can give those messages over in a manner that really does grab attention and they can make a difference. And that goes back to the lessons for life as being part of this. We hope that the push that we've got on this big tech and junk food to put a levy on will bring in the funds that really can make the difference. So when MPs come to us and say, well, it's going to cost, we can say, it's already costing the society a massive amount. It's costing the NHS a massive amount because this wasn't done earlier. Do something now. Prevention is key. Let's move the needle. All we need to do is do this and it will make a big difference to society. And it's going to happen in other countries. It already is. So we're not the only ones looking at this. So I'm hoping that's where the funds are. And we've got 60 MPs that are in, MPs and parliamentarians they've signed up to this, which is a 10% of the government, the whole political parties out there as well.
I mean, for those watching this podcast, the petition sounds like a sort of low-hanging fruit, really. Is that the ask, really, of educators, teachers, parents to go and look at that, to consider signing it?
Yeah, and sharing and because I think it's an instant thing. We all know as teachers the damage that we're seeing. We're seeing the children that are coming post-COVID are coming in with real concerns that they didn't have at that age 4 or 5 in just the way that they know their bodies work even. And you've also then seen that knock-on effect as they transition, not only to secondary school. I'm lucky enough that my son, I've got an adopted son who's been at Nottingham University, brilliant, except for he's back home. Because he hasn't been able really to get that real clear transition. Yeah. And I think that's where we've got to make sure that they're there. And this is why we're doing this whole thing, this life, making sure life skills is throughout, making sure it's well funded so that it can be done properly.
And just a final question, Paul. You've been great. Thanks so much for joining us. But I'm going to say 10 years time. I'm reluctant to say 10 years because it feels such a long time away. But if we are having this conversation again in 10 years' time, or even 5, what does success look like from all this? What is the thing that needs to change and to have happened as a result?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is that we really must put children back at the front again. We must make sure that we understand that they're going to be the part that is the productive society. If, when you talk to economists, etc., they say, well, really, it's about the productive society that's going to grow that will make us all richer in different ways. In the end, it doesn't matter how much money you have if you're going to die at 40 because of a heart attack and because of da-da-da-da. So we've got to get those life skills in. We've got to make sure that it's there. And I think if we find that in 5 years' time, that life skills is that whole kind of area in schools, it's not seen as something on the side. It actually is seen as the core of what we do. And then education, our general education is there. Then we will have succeeded. I think we also must make sure that outside the parents' field board, the grandparents, the regions, the public health departments, everything around it starts to understand we've got to get that life skills, the emotional health right. And then everything else falls back into place. We'll see the NHS waiting list go down. We'll see the number of people that have to have operations, see the doctors, the mental health crisis. All those things start to drop. And it will take time. So 5 years would be a start. 15 years would show us what the 5 years has done. And again, we've got to look longer term, not be so short-termist that we've had of recent, where it's like tugboat policies instead of going, we're going to set the Armada this direction, plan it all, and we're going to get there. And you're much more likely to do that. So I'm hopeful that will occur. And I hope to come back in 5 years and see it done.
Paul, thank you very much, and best of luck making that next step.